Diana is wearing weightlifting shoes, which is a heel elevated shoe. I'm wearing a flat-soled shoe. So the question was, when do we know if we're going to be using heels? Well, there's two main reasons why we'd use heels. One is to assist us with achieving greater depth and maintaining a great position from start to finish. So what's a great position mean? With depth in powerlifting competition, that's the only competition that judges us on depth officially. So if you don't compete, you're not being judged on depth. We go as deep as our mobility allows. So that's the terminology that I'll be using. In powerlifting, the crease of the hip needs to go below the top of the knee. Okay, so that's the crease of the hip. It's below the top of the knee. That's got to be higher. So if we come a bit higher, that's parallel, also known as high. So people say powerlifting depth is parallel. It's not. It's below parallel. But if you're not a powerlifter, you don't need any of that. There are such things as partial range squats, which I'm not a huge fan of. And typically, what I want to be working people towards is roughly powerlifting depth, even if you're not a competitor. However, if you've got some type of condition where your joints don't allow you to achieve that depth, I won't force you to go ass to grass. For example, if you lack the mobility to achieve that depth, depending on the squat pattern, that's when I might suggest something like a squat shoe. So Dinny's using them just to keep it simple today. We're just going to have one pair of footwear. But a lot of the variations that we do, like, will be flat-soled shoe or even bare feet. So bare feet is equivalent to a flat-soled shoe. Now, the elevated heel makes up for a lack of ankle joint dorsiflexion. So plantar flexion is pointing downwards, dorsiflexion is upwards. So if you lack ankle joint dorsiflexion, it may interfere with achieving a great depth in squatting. So therefore, adding heel elevation can assist you in achieving a better depth. What do we need more depth for? Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the science. Science is now coming out with a whole bunch of new research that supports training the muscle at the longest position has the most benefit for muscle building. Okay, so that means we've got this range of motion, okay, that's where the muscles are at the shortest position, and then this range of motion where the muscles are at the fully lengthened position. So if you were to compare three ranges of motion, which is what a lot of the research compares, the third range is full range. So you've got lengthened partials, which is lengthened partials, versus shortened partials versus full range. Contrary to the way that I like to do it, which is full range, lengthened partials produce the most hypertrophy. So if your goal is purely muscle building, that's going to be more beneficial, which is where an elevated heel can allow you to achieve greater depth and train your muscles through a more lengthened position. Now, in a powerlifting competition, you don't need to worry about muscle hypertrophy or lengthened anything. All you need to worry about is objectively achieving that specific depth where the crease of your hip goes below the top of your knee. And a lot of great powerlifters are able to achieve that without the assistance of elevated heels. And sometimes the elevated heels can make it a little bit weaker. Like, that's how it does for me. For me, I squat in competition with flat-soled shoe because I'm stronger that way. It allows me to sit my hips back and use my stronger hips. Elevating the heels will allow you to push the knees further forward and remain more upright. If you lack the mobility, that's just what you have to do to allow more depth. Now, there's another reason why we might elevate the heels. If you want to build muscle specifically, there's a squat variation that we would prefer that's going to allow us to bend our knees more and bend our hips less. See, what we've got is we've got the two main joints that are acting on a squat, which is the hip joints and the knee joints. So there's a hip dominant squat and a knee dominant squat. A hip dominant squat is where the hips shoot back further. That uses a stronger structure, which is our hip extensors. Then we've got another squat pattern where our knees push forward further, which uses a different structure, which is the knee extensors. Or in other words, the muscles responsible for knee extension is what? Quadriceps. So if you want to build quadriceps, this is kind of like the optimal position to be in. My heels are elevated, they're coming off the ground. I kind of don't want that, it's a bit weaker. Okay, but this is where a heel elevation built in the shoe can help achieve this position that I'm doing here, which is less hip bend and more knee bend. So if I want to maximize quadriceps involvement, I need to maximize the amount of knee bend. This is maximal knee bend. How do I know it's maximal knee bend? Because my hamstrings are squashed up against my calf. I physically cannot achieve greater amount of knee bend. The muscles responsible for extending my knee joint are what? Quadriceps. If your goal is purely building quads, that's going to be my preference in footwear, regardless of whether you have the mobility or not. I promise you, Dinny, got some of the best mobility I've seen. She doesn't actually need those shoes to achieve a great depth in squatting, but she uses those shoes to optimize her depth. exactly the same as the second most mobile athletes in the Olympics. Who would they be? Who are the most mobile athletes in the Olympics? Gymnasts. Who are the second most mobile athletes in the Olympics? Olympic weightlifters. So they are mobile, yet they all choose to wear these shoes. So a lot of people say only wear them if you lack mobility. Not necessarily. They do not lack mobility. Why are they using the shoes then? Because it optimizes their position in weightlifting. How does it optimize their position? Let's talk about the position in weightlifting. So snatch or a clean and jerk, where you're having to hold the heaviest weight possible overhead. What are some of the positional advantages that they would need to achieve their positions? Upright torso. Yeah, so if you saw what I was doing here with my heels elevated, upright torso as opposed to heels flat on the ground. I do not want to hold, and I wouldn't be able to hold a really, really heavy weight over my head with my torso tipped that far forward. It's inefficient and it's going to beat my shoulders up over time.